Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to IGCSE Success. Now we've looked at some of the mistakes you should avoid making with the writer's effect question. Now it's time to look at question 3, the extended writing response. And there's a ton of pitfalls that you really want to avoid if you want to secure a high mark. Let's take a look at some of them. But before we do that, let's have a quick question 3 rewind. So what does this question involve? Well, there's 15 marks for reading, there's 10 marks for writing. So predominantly it is a reading question. There are 3 bullet points. You will always get 3 bullet points. You have to cover them equally. And for most text types, this will mean that you will end up with 3 equal sized paragraphs, and that's usually about a page and a half, 2 pages of the answer booklet. You need to include a range of ideas. It doesn't need to be 15 ideas. You do not get a point per quotation you pulled out from the text. I would guess that 10, 12, as long as you develop those ideas, is plenty. Make sure that you develop some of your ideas relevantly, more on that later. You have to create and sustain a convincing voice. So by that I mean, if you are assuming the role of an angry mother, you need to show through your language and any language, stylistic, structural features that you use, and ultimately use everything in your language toolbox to create a sense of character. If that's an angry mother, it's an angry mother. If it's an astute businesswoman, it's an astute businesswoman. You get where I'm going with that. I've lost my trail of thought. It's late. You need to use a range of language and stylistic choices. So I use the acronym A Ripe Forest. Try and pepper them throughout to get your writing marks. And my number 1 tip, do not lift from the text. And again, more on that later. So let's just quickly take a look at a question 3 from the November 21 series, I believe. You are Sonny. Your father and the rest of the family have watched the video you made to record his 50th birthday bicycle ride. After the family have watched the video, you write your journal entry, in which some of these tasks are just very, very bizarre. And we're just going to focus, for this video, we're just going to focus on that first bullet point, and that is describe your father's plans and preparations for his birthday and how you felt about them. Now, just to give you a bit of context, Dad has reached 50 years old. He wants to prove himself. He's at that ripe old age. He wants to do something to challenge himself both mentally and physically. So he decides that an appropriate challenge would be going on this pretty tough bicycle challenge. The terrain is difficult, and of course he's got his son driving close by him, filming his whole ordeal. An interesting text. If you've downloaded my work booklet, I've actually written a complete model for this. And if you haven't downloaded my workbook for question 3, be sure to download it, particularly if you're not confident with this question. As I mentioned, there is a full model for this question. Now, bullet point 1 reads, describe your father's plans and preparations for his birthday and how you felt about them. Now, many texts will be in the point of view of a particular character, and then you will be asked to assume the role of someone completely different. So just bear that in mind. With the case of this text, you are being asked to assume the role of his son, Sonny. I've just pulled this extract from the text. It's towards the bottom part of text C. And in terms of preparing, Dad pulls out his dusty old machine from the shed, and Dad believes that he's this bike mechanic. So instead of investing in a new bike, he decides to fix his bike himself. That's a little bit of context, and that's all you really need to know to understand this video. Fingers crossed. Now we're just going to focus on that first piece of evidence, the dusty old machine out from the shed. And let's take a look at some pitfalls I often see. So mistake number 1, and this is by far the biggest mistake that I often see, the biggest pitfall. You really, really want to avoid this. Let's take a read. I couldn't quite believe it when I saw my dad pulling out his old dusty machine from the shed. What's wrong? I'll give you 5 seconds thinking time. Now, of course, I am lifting from the text. You really want to avoid doing that at all costs. How to fix it? I couldn't quite believe it when I saw my dad dusting off his fossilized bike. Would be perfect. Now let's take a look at mistake number 2. I couldn't quite believe it when I saw my dad pulling out his sooty ancient cycle out of the outbuilding. What's wrong? I'll give you 5 seconds thinking time. Now this is something I also see an awful lot. Finding synonyms for every single word. Now question 3, it really is not about highlighting a bunch of evidence and finding synonyms for every single adjective, every single verb that's used. Technically, it's not wrong because you're not lifting from the text, but you're not going to get the question finished in time. You need to think about what the main idea is. Now let's take a look at how to fix it. I couldn't quite believe it when I saw my dad unearthing his fossilized bike. The fact that it was caked in cobwebs didn't seem to bother him. So I've included some development there. Obviously, we find out that the bike is dusty, so by all means you could include that it was caked in cobwebs, but fossilized is more than enough to show that you have extracted an explicit idea from the text. Now, my number 1 tip is think about what the main idea is. As mentioned before, in this case, the idea is that the father is getting his old bike out of the shed. Don't overcomplicate things by finding synonyms for every single word. It is not necessary. Now let's take a look at mistake number 3, the last mistake that I often see, and we're going to look at that second quotation. So, some oiling and greasing and a new chain later. To make matters worse, Dad thought he was some bike mechanic and decided to repair the bike himself. I mean, anything wrong with that? I'll give you 5 seconds thinking time. There is no development. Now, how can we improve that? Let's take a look. To make matters worse, Dad thought he was some bike mechanic and decided to repair the bike himself. I was left utterly dumbfounded. Was I feeling slightly cynical about Dad completing the challenge successfully? Absolutely. And you'll notice I've tried to pepper in some a ripe forest or persuasive techniques as well. We've got the rhetorical question there. And it's developed suitably. There's a convincing and sustained voice as well. And that's what you want to try and do throughout your whole piece. And there you have it, guys. Let me know if you want me to do a video like this for the summary question. I will be back soon with another video. Until next time, bye-bye.